Ars is a virgin loser who got isekai into a fantasy world after overworking himself. He is reincarnated with a weak wall hack ability to see other people's stats. So he decides to use his ability to create a Justice League for baddies in order to gain political power. In the Summer Fourth Kingdom, the whole community gathers in tears to barbecue Kreese and Ren's father, and Ars calls the kids forward so they can say their final farewell to their pops, stating that he was an awesome dude who taught him many things. He then walks up to the fire and adds some veggies to the roast with tears dropping from his eyes, which touches the heart of everyone. As he gathers the pieces of his broken heart, he announces to everyone that he is the master of House Louvant from that day onwards. He then recalls when he was a lonely virgin who was working a depressing office job and lived an unhealthy lifestyle on fast foods while gaming into the late nights after coming off work. This catches up to him as one day his heart suddenly gives up on him and he gets a one-way ticket on the isekai train. Soon after, he wakes to see a hot bimbo who calls him a silly boy. However, he has no idea who the chick is, and she also states that she never expected him to be so cute. While he is wondering if he's in a clinic and if the gal is a nurse, a freaking flying dog pops out of nowhere, which surprises him, and the chick says the dog seems to like him. After this, a maid informs the lady that her tea is ready, and while she thanks her, she walks up to him, saying that he is cuter than her ex. He then sees his reflection as a baby in her tray, which shocks him and he can't believe his eyes. 3 years later, while Ars is in a big-ass library reading a bunch of books, the four-eyed maid brings him his beverage, and she is surprised to see that such a young kid has more brains than an old hag like her. At this time, Ars figures out that he was reincarnated in the Summerforth Empire, which rules the continent of Summerforth, and he is currently not on Earth as the map of that world looks very unfamiliar. He also learned that magic exists in that world which lets them do extraordinary stuff like they were in the Elden Ring game, and also knows that he is born into a noble household known as the Louvant family, which is in charge of Lamberg, a small region of a couple thousand people. This makes them rich as hell as they can afford to live in a castle that's straight out of a Disney cartoon, and they even kick things up a notch by hiring tons of hot maids and a chef to take care of them. Realizing how blessed he is, Ars feels happy to be living his best life, and also notes that he seems to be a special kid, the kind with superpowers. Later on, he joins the warriors on the training grounds, asking if he can watch from a safe distance, and the crew approves of it, pointing out that he comes to see them quite a lot, even as a pipsqueak, also mentioning that he'd probably become as strong as Saitama one day. As he wanders around, he spots one of the warriors wiping the floor with his opponent, telling him to grow some muscles, and Ars reveals that the special ability he has is called appraisal, while using it on the men sparring. This makes him see the stats of the warrior, and he motives that he has high aptitude as an archer, which means he'd be good with bows. However, the dude seems to be struggling in the fight, so Ars approaches him asking if he has ever used a bow, and he nonchalantly replies that he wouldn't hold a bow even if his imaginary girlfriend threatened to dump him, as it's a cowardly way of fighting since it requires shooting the enemy from a safe distance. Hearing this, Ars tries to convince him, stating that he feels the dude will be able to handle a bow well, and asks him to give it a chance, giving him puppy eyes to sway him. Seeing this, the other muscleheads tell him to do as Ars suggested, and before taking his first shot, he reveals he has never handled a bow in his life. So another archer suggests he get closer to the target since he is a newbie, but Ars tells him not to move an inch. After this, the dude gets in his shooting stance, and surprisingly, he gets a bullseye, causing the whole crowd's jaws to drop. As the archer thinks it's a fluke, they tell him to take a second shot, and even after several tries, the dude just can't seem to miss. Seeing this, the other adventurers are amazed, praising his abilities with the bows even though he sucks with a spear, and the dude starts digging the attention, stating that the bow seems to be a sick weapon, switching up his entire resolve, as he states that all weapons are fair in a war. Meanwhile, another man asks Ars how he knew that Malay is a natural-born archer, which puts Ars on the hot seat, and in response, he says he went with his guts to keep his power secret, as he doubts they'll believe him if he tells them he sees their stats floating around in numerical values. Also, he notices there's a problem with the power as he can't use it on himself, and although he feels a bit disappointed, he puts the thought off as he's also afraid of what he'd see. Later at the house, Ars gets very excited when the family chef presents enough food to feed an army to him, and before he can dig in, his father reveals that he heard what he did earlier at the training ground, which makes him nervous. Just then, he uses his appraisal ability on his pops, revealing that his father's martial arts prowess is so high that he has a chance of defeating Baki in a fistfight. His father then tells him to train his instincts as he'll eventually become the head of their community, and his talents would be very useful when that time comes. Hearing this, the reality that he'll become a lord hit him hard as it'll end his freeloading career, and his father gives him his portion of food, saying he wants Ars to grow up fast. Seeing his future responsibilities, Ars decides to know more about the Empire, and in the process, he comes to find out that his future as a lord is a bed of roses with 6-inch thorns, as the rulers of Summer 4th are corrupt douchebags. This causes the peasants to continuously revolt against the leaders, and if this doesn't end, Ars predicts that the whole empire will be consumed by war. If this happens, he'll have to lead his forces into battle, which scares the crap out of him as he doubts a weak loser like him can keep the town safe. However, he musters up the courage he needs so he can protect his loved ones. Later on, he goes into town in disguise, but he gets busted by a body-positive chick who says it's rare to see him around by himself, and while she blabs on, he uses his skill on some NPCs as a form of training. After a while, he gets exhausted and realizes that his abilities make his eyes as red as eraser heads when he uses them for a long time. Suddenly, he sees someone being kicked out of a tavern, and he looks different from everyone else, noticing that everyone seems to avoid him. He then realizes that he is a Malkin, which is a group of people who came to Summer 4th from across the seas majorly as slaves, and he decides to approach him, offering him some food, which surprises everyone. Initially, Rights refuses to accept it as he doesn't trust him, but his hunger causes him to fold. When Ars uses his ability on him, he is stunned to see that he is strong as hell, causing Ars to stare at him like he has seen a rare Pokemon, and after he thanks Ars, he decides to leave. However, Ars follows him around like a gum stuck under his shoe, and he eventually warns him against following him as the adults may get upset with him. Just then, Ars asks him to become his retainer, which shocks him, and he thinks Ars is pulling a prank on him. To convince him, Ars reveals that he is a big shot in the village, saying he can sense his great power, and Rights doubts that he can sense powers, stating that he is thankful for his kindness but turns down his request as he wants to avoid causing trouble for Ars. However, Ars assures him it won't be a problem, but he still stands by his decision and walks away, causing Ars to chase after him as he might never see someone as strong as him again. Realizing that Rights is starving, he decides to lure him with food, stating that his family chef would make him all kinds of delicious meals if he accepts the deal, and he totally falls for it. Afterward, the two head back to his house, and after seeing how big it is, Rights finally believes that Ars is a mini celebrity. When they head in, Ars sets up a whole feast for just him, but the maid hands him a single bowl of soup, stating that she can't give him the same treatment as Ars. And the butler lets his inner KKK show as he tells Rights to leave as soon as he is done with the meal. Seeing their attitude towards him, Ars doubts he can use Talk no Jutsu on them, so he decides to move closer to Rights and share his portion of food with him, which stuns everyone. When they try to protest, he shuts them up, saying he is his honored guest, and this makes them switch up their attitude towards Rights, giving him enough to eat. Ars then asks him why he came to the town, and he explains that he was part of a band of mercenaries, but his group divided when many of his comrades took a permanent vacation to heaven, so he has been wandering like Kenshin and ended up in their town. Ars proceeds to ask why he didn't join another group, and he replies that people won't hire a kid who has no accomplishments, which saddens Ars. Just then, Mr. Jerk interrupts their bromance, asking Rights to be on his way, causing Ars to get annoyed and reveal that he intends to make him his retainer, stunning everyone. Later on, Ars decides to tell his pops about his intentions, and as expected, his father turns down his request as having a Malkman as a retainer seems very foolish. However, Ars stands on business, stating that Rights is talented and they'll be missing out if they don't keep him. Even at that, his father still says that Malkmans are inferior to Summer 4thians and can't be stronger than them, but Ars still believes that Rights will be very useful to them. So he keeps trying to change his father's mind, assuring him that Rights is super strong, and tells him to test him if he is still in doubt. After a while, his father finally agrees to give him a chance and promises to employ him as a soldier if he proves himself. He then says that Ritz's test will be a duel with him, which makes Ars get nervous and attempt to discourage him, stating how one-sided the battle seems. So his father says he'll give him a handicap, and Rights accepts the duel. While they head to the arena, Rights asks Ars why he desperately wants to hire him as it feels like a dream to him, and Ars takes loving your bro too far as he says he needs Rights in his life. Later on, before they begin the duel, R's father mentions that Rights wins if he can land a single blow on him in a limited time, which gives R's some hope, and he tells Rights to introduce himself since they're about to duel. After this, they begin the fight, and Rights soon realizes how outmatched he is. However, he struggles to keep up, and R's begins to panic, but the other soldiers are surprised that Reincarnates can hold his ground against R's father. Soon after, Reincarnates takes a hit, and while R's almost gets a heart attack, the other soldiers start mocking him. Even in his weakened state, Reincarnates gets back on his feet, and considering the kindness R's has shown him, he decides to go into beast mode. Suddenly, the match seems to be a bit even as he begins pressuring R's father, and fortunately, he is able to graze him before his time elapses, which amazes everyone. As he has won the duel, R Sr. fulfills his promise to hire Reincarnates, and Rs congratulates him, thanking his father for giving him a chance, who admits that Rs was right to stand up for Reincarnates as he may become a top-class fighter in the future. His father then praises R's ability to read people, stating that he could even become an emperor someday, which makes Rs happy while the soldiers swarm Reincarnates, asking him to teach them his moves. Later on, Rs meets up with Reincarnates at the house, and while the two talk, Reincarnates reveals that he wants to help Rs out as much as he can, as having someone dominate him has always been a dream of his. Then he pledges to spend the rest of his days repaying Rs for his kindness. Do you think Rs will turn out to be an emperor? My Riz Demons, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and check out one of these 2 other videos. Also, if you want to get that shredded anime physique, click the link in the description below.